Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We just got done listening to some hard rock. We are going to be checking out a special selection now, and that is where one of you tell me exactly what it is you want me to check out. If you'd like to submit your own special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's special selection comes out of some Artist Circle. It says requesting Epica, Chasing the Dragon. So far, you've reacted to one song off their first album and one off their fifth, splitting the difference here with a request off their third. Looking forward to hearing what you think. So that's what we're going to be checking out today. We got some Chasing the Dragon from Epica, some symphonic metal. Let's see what they're bringing to the table today. Yes. I love the way those two guitars are rhythmically bouncing off of each other and accenting sometimes the same note and then sometimes notes around each other. Yeah, we got some counterpoint there. It's a higher pitched instrument behind the vocals that's playing around what the vocals are doing. First really heavy bit of tension there in the progression. Nowhere near as tense this time around. Really great flow to all of this. The melodic lines, the supporting parts, all of it. That vibrato there to finish that line off, so good. Bringing these vocals up, really widening them out, empowering them, not just rising in range, but in delivery as well. I love all the little dynamics too, not just in volume, but simple ideas like swells. Utilizing these guitars more for their fuzzy foundational element than anything else. Hitting that groove. Yeah, with the rhythmic brass ideas against that metronome on the drums. Very theatric, has some really nice string work as ornamental ideas. And this constant shift in the tempo, really driving between intense energy and laid back elements, more somber. We have these smaller half note movements in the chord progression in some instruments, while the others hold out the full whole note, providing these micro movements in the chord progression. We've got some counterpoint and a secondary set of vocals. Yeah, these really syncopated lines they are just infectious. Tons of groove. I like how we still have the more legato flowing strings against the more staccato syncopated ones. Really bringing both elements in here of the drive and sort of this flow. Interesting they don't stay in a section for too long. Response between this lower choir and the growls. And I think that's the first time we've had a rough transition. We have that moment of silence to just break apart what we had prior and then what we have after. Very melodramatic. An interesting way to bring us back into this opening section, though. Yeah, nice fermata there at the ends. Yeah, I enjoyed that. Assuming it's over. Is it over? Yeah, there we go. All right. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Lots of really cool things going on in there. Man, there's going to be a lot of things to talk about here. I will say, though, just right off the bat, we've listened to a little bit. We really haven't listened to a lot of symphonic metal on the channel, but the ones that we have listened to, I would say for the most part, I expressed this idea that I'm not a huge fan of using the orchestral element texturally. You're not going to introduce any of the classical compositional ideas into your music. You're just using the strings to make your song sound wider, to have that extra regal element to it, just to have that string sound. I'm not a huge fan of that angle. I think it works. I'm definitely not hating on it. It does add an extra texture. It adds an extra timbre to your music, and if that's all you want, well, go for it. But I really enjoy stuff like this when we get to hear a compositionally and structurally a rock song, a metal song at its heart, utilizing the extra instrumentation in more classical ways. We have the strings, we have the brass, and I want to say there was a flute. I didn't hear a lot of woodwind throughout, but I think there was a flute at one time. And they're being utilized in ways that doesn't adhere to applying a rock idea to the instrument. They're actually bringing classical ideas to the metal composition. And I think this is at least as far as I see it, my favorite way of pairing symphonic metal, bringing the symphony to the metal, not just the sound of it, but actually bringing symphonic ideas to metal. And this is more than I could have asked for. This is just some really beautiful stuff, and I'm glad that I got a chance to listen to this. Now, one of those things I quite enjoyed is honestly everything about the beginning. I think that if we examine how they created the intro 2 or 3 minutes of the song, we can actually extrapolate that and see how they created the rest of the track. So we start off with two guitars, and two guitars. We have a rhythmic line that's right panned, and then we have a foundational line that's just running up and down chords, one string at a time. And so our foundational stuff is laying down the chord progression, and then we have this right panned lead guitar that is playing a lead melody. However, at this point, what it's playing is not as important as when it is playing. It has these heavily accentuated strikes, and they provide this really percussive element on top of this rather legato guitar playing underneath it. Legato is just fancy music term for flowing, right? So if you have a bunch of notes together, you could do like a two, 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 two. That's staccato. That's harsh emphasis on the beginning. Legato would be do, 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 do. Really soft attacks, right? So we have this really flowing element underneath, and then these harsh attacks on top of it that are accenting specific beats or offbeats in some situations. And it isn't long before we get a left pan guitar that is also playing something very similar to what everybody else is playing. It's this very light, flowy kind of music. However, every once in a while, we get these really harsh attacks, these accented hits. And what's interesting about this section is that we've already begun to create a percussive element on top of this foundational work, and the two melodies, which are providing counterpoint, counter melody between the two. If you listen primarily to the accented notes, we're going to get some really interesting rhythms, because occasionally they'll play on the same beat, occasionally they'll be back and forth. You get like dun dun dun, these really like this back and forth kind of sharp attacks, and it's really interesting to hear to listen to the playfulness of this section. There are a lot of elements that are coming together in beautiful ways, whether you're looking at the way that these individual eighth notes, look at the notes being played between the foundational one and the two side guitars, and look at the triads being created on every single half of a beat, downbeats and offbeats. I believe we're playing eighth notes here. There's just a lot of triads being created with a beautiful flow in progress, listening to the musical elements of the notes themselves and the space between them, and what kind of note relationships we're hearing, which is creating these chords, and how the chord progresses on this micro level on top of the macro level, looking at the chord itself. Because each bar appears to have a chord assigned to it, and the triads within it are based off of said chord. And then, of course, the vocals come in, and now we have a third a third melody layer, and it is more dominantly melodic. The two guitars had melody, but they were also just playing eighth note rhythms, so there isn't a lot of varying elements in the rhythmic component of these two guitars to say that they have strong melodic composition. Whereas with the vocals, we have this very nice phrasing, this ebb and flow of spacing between notes, varying lengths of groups, where you might have one note and then a rest, and then two notes and then a rest, and then you're like five notes, and there's a nice flow of range. We have rising in range, lowering in range, rising in range, lowering in range, and the way that she crafts this melody line, and eventually we hear a flute that comes in behind it and provides another strong melodic component. So we get a first situation of proper counter melody here between the flute and the vocalist, while we also have all these little micro interactions going on with these three guitars underneath it. Gorgeous. This is how you layer music on the most minute layer, or the most minute level, ensuring that every single beat is consonant, every single bar is consonant, every single phrase is consonant, and you're looking at all of this for 5 instruments. All of them kind of doing the same thing in the same range. There really was not a lot of variety going on. Timbre wise, note wise, range wise, it really is the smaller ideas and keeping everything separated in the mix. So the production comes into play here in ensuring that this isn't a chaotic mess and that everything feels cohesive. I also love how it sets up the rest of the song. This is, like I mentioned, a rather small section. We have all these layers present, but they're all in the same kind of volume. It's not very big, it's not very wide. They're all kind of in the same range. They're all kind of doing the same things. It's a very small production, especially when we compare it to some of the larger moments that we get into with more layers, more volume, more notes, more timbres. Everything gets huge. This is a really nice way to start a song that's going to grow exponentially. And then the drums come in and they provide the next rhythmic component. We used to rely on the accented notes in the guitars for a bit of rhythm. Now we actually have a drum set whose core purpose is to provide a rhythmic component underneath. And it really is more of a metronome style of playing right here, providing bass kicks and snares on beats. The cymbals, I think, were every beat, every other beat. It wasn't too complex. It was mostly just sitting there to be a metronome and to provide a little bit of variety to what we had just got done listening to for a minute and a half now, I think. But what was interesting is that one of the guitars, I think, shifted to more of a syncopated idea. It wasn't a super groovy section, but it was beginning to introduce an idea that they would go into real hard when we hit the metal section, which is this element of groove. So a little bit of foreshadowing there, which I thought was pretty cool. It was around this time also that the vocalist decided to go up a half an octave, a whole octave, and finally separate their voice range from the guitars underneath. And this is important because we need that space to be opened up for more things coming in, like the strings who are going to fill in this space, and the bass that helps fill in this space. So although the bass is a little lower, but the bass was playing a bit higher notes, so they kind of fit in there a little bit, sometimes dip down into more of the bass area, but they just kind of played around this area, sometimes inviting themselves into this higher area and sometimes going back to where they feel comfortable. And I think it's only like 1 or 2 sections away before we pull out the the acoustic guitars for the electric guitars. And they're definitely going to be filling the zone. So it's important to get the voice out of here and bring it up to where it's going to be sitting for the rest of the song primarily. To make room for the rest of the instrumentation, we need to bring into this section. Now the guitars come in and they replace the chordal movement that's going on underneath everything with that acoustic guitar with fuzz. I don't remember if they were playing one note or if they were playing like a power chord or something. It was a rather simple idea that they were presenting, but they were utilized for their texture. And I know I just got done talking about how I don't like when instruments are used for their texture, but I think this is an important part of the process. Like I've mentioned many times in the past, every tool has a use. There is no such thing as a bad tool or a wrong tool. It's more about how you use them. And this idea is to introduce the electric guitars without overbearing the listener, without overshadowing everything that's going on. We are bringing them in, they're quieter, they're foundational, and we are replacing guitars with guitars, so you might not even really notice that there's been that big of a change yet, especially if you're paying attention to the vocals and the strings, everything else that's going on. The drums have begun to take up a more upbeat approach to their rhythmic style, and again, it isn't long. I'm not sure, one beat or one section, 2 sections away before we go into the full metal section, and the guitars are doing these syncopated hits, the syncopated rhythm idea, and the drums are like double bassing, and we got the growls. This is where the instruments are utilized and bringing in the compositional ideas that they do best, this overbearing, aggressive kind of music. Especially since they seem to be um, maybe down-tuned, maybe not down-tuned, but they're really going for that lowest string, going for like this really beefy, meaty foundational idea, just really coming in with this weight, this power, right? And it would have felt out of place to go from the intro to this right here. So that's why we needed the guitars to come in earlier, but just the texture, just that fuzzy element, and have that sit as a foundation under everything else so that we can hear the smooth transition from one idea to the next. You can almost think of this section as an entire transitory element when you look at the structure of the song. Now, there's also lyrics here. There's some really strong melodic ideas that don't appear anywhere else. It is its own unique area, but it serves both its purpose in the story of the song as well as more of a functional purpose of introducing these instruments before we bring in the harsher components that typically are paired with the sound in the next section. It is just a really beautiful way of stringing these two ideas together, and it stands out as one of the key moments that I would put in opposition to that one harsh transition that they do where we go from the metal, and then beat 4 of that last bar is silence, and then we go into that final moment with the one of those low, maybe a cello or something, holding out these long notes before we move back in and reintroduce the intro idea. We have that harsh transition. It feels harsh and disjointed. It feels abrupt, not just because it is, but also because we have spent 5 minutes prior to this having these really clean, smooth transitions throughout. It is important that we create this contrast to amplify the abruptness of it. And then I've kind of explained what happens afterwards. We have we have more layers continuingly pop up from here on until we hit that abrupt stop where we have more vocals coming in. We seem to have some choirs. We have a higher range choir that fits with the female clean vocals. We also have a lower sort of male choir sound that fits with the growls. And this is where we begin to see the orchestral instruments, the brass and the string, not so much play lead anymore, but play ornamental ideas. And I really, really love how these ornamental ideas are rooted in classical use, not metal use. We don't see a lot of typical metal ornamentations popping up. We have these really nice string runs mixed with swells. Swelling is just not something we see too often in metal, other than a transitory idea where you might use a foot pedal to put your guitar's volume to 0, strum your guitar, and then use your foot pedal to swell into the next section or the beginning of a song or whatever. It's a transitory idea, not an embellishing one. Whereas in metal, we tend to see it as embellishing, or even a textural one where it's utilized in the middle of ideas, sometimes repeatedly in the middle of ideas, to have this constant swelling effect where you get the wah, wah, wah. It's a way to build tension. It's a way to build energy. And like I said in the beginning, metal and classical music tend to use the same tools in very different ways. And this is true for any genre. The tools are all there. How they utilize them, the standard use of them, is going to differ from genre to genre. And this is one of the things that I really love about this band, is that they're bringing classical ideas with the classical instruments to it. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about bringing classical ideas over. Both genres use volume swelling. They both use them in different ways. And I love how we actually get to hear the classical use of the swell here. There's also, we hear not constantly, but we hear all the time in metal songs, especially what we just listened to last week with metalcore, mathcore, is the accented note, right? And multiple accented notes back to back to emphasize different beats or offbeats, and creating, rhythmically interesting ideas there. We usually call those, well, I call them accented beats. I don't know what metal would call them. But in classical, they're usually utilized in a very similar manner, but not as often. In mathcore, they were really utilized to create something that sounded disjointed. Having all these rhythmic attacks back to back, emphasizing beats that didn't seem to have any purpose outside of the emphasis. And here we get to hear what we call an orchestral stinger, and it happens a lot in the brass, where you kind of get the bop, ba bop, bop, and you get these really sharp attacks that are cut off real quick, right? Staccato notes with a sharp attack on them. And hearing it as an ornamental idea rather than a lead idea. Again, it's the opposite. It's the same technique, opposite use. And the brass utilizes it here to emphasize specific beats and to drive the rest of the song, what's happening on those beats, mostly as an embellishing idea to push extra emphasis on them rather than to stand out and be what the song or the section is about, which is what mathcore typically, from what I've listened to last week, utilizes it as. It's there to be the lead line, the disjointedness of the attacks, and the fact that we have this difference between this harsh attack and the less harsh attacks is the lead element. It's not an embellishing idea. And so it gives it this very soundtrack, theatric kind of feel to it, because a lot of these ornamental ideas that we're hearing are also things that we hear in a lot of soundtracks to introduce ideas of adventure. We have a lot of rising tension in here with these stingers, with the swells, and especially since the swells in the strings were paired with these rising runs, where they would start at one note and like rise up to a higher note and get this nice swelling intensity with not only the volume rising but the pitch rising as well. And all of this is sitting on the outsides, the periphery of this raw metal, double bass kick, loud guitars, growling stuff going on with this call and response between the choir and the growls. And it is a very full, layered element or section of the song that is just full of components that are metal and or orchestral, classical. And this is, to me, symphonic metal. Hearing both sides of these ideas, where we have rock ideas with classical instrumentation, we have classical ideas with classical instrumentation, we have metal ideas with metal instrumentation, we have metal ideas with classical instrumentation. It is all of these combinations swirled into one to create a very specific sound that you could not create with one or the other. It is a combination of both technique and timbre, and it comes together so well. These guys are compositional geniuses as far as that is concerned. I love every moment of this track, just listening to how they go about combining everything. And of course, it's the little things too. It's the little ornamentations that you might not even notice. It's the counterpoint. It's the foreshadowing. It's the callbacks. That final section brings back the first verse, probably with new lyrics. I'm going to dive into that in a second. And we might even find out that the new lyrics provide a new angle to understand the chord progression and feelings and atmosphere of this section and subvert it and give it a new meaning. I don't know. I'm going to find out in a second when I dive into the lyrics. But musically, everything here is fire. These guys are phenomenal classical composers who just happen to also utilize not just metal instrumentation, but also metal compositional tools and tools in a more metal mindset. And they just pair everything together so nicely. Let me check out these lyrics, and we'll be back with that. Interesting. This song seems to be about addiction of some sort, possibly drug, but I'm not going to lean into that reading too much. There is the idea of poison sleeping through my veins, stealing the only dignity from me. That is really the only thing I think that kind of alludes to drug use rather than any sort of addiction. But it is interesting to have a lot of these positive elements being paired with that idea. And I wonder if possibly the intro part of the song is a request to the addiction to help free my mind, heal my scars, erase the past, dark days to forget, make me forget and forgive, the kind of way that whether it's scrolling through social media and looking at all the positivity, or actually, drinking or smoking to change your mental state to make you forget about things, and to not have to deal with any negative part of your life. And having that with the soothing comfort of that opening introduction. I could be reading these lyrics wrong, but that's how I'm feeling it, and I think that's an interesting way to start talking about addiction. Is beginning with the lure of it, of having it help you deal with pain. And then it looks like possibly about the time that the heavier guitars come in is when it seems to be a reflection of what's actually happening. Poison seeping through my veins, stealing dignity from me. I pick them up and let them fall. Realizing that it's causing damage. And if I'm reading this correctly and pairing it properly, I believe when the male vocals, the growls come in, it seems to be the drug demanding use, or the addiction demanding attention. It says, obscene, give me what I want, give me what I want right now. That's what I want, that's what I need. There's some Latin in here. And this section seems to end with the word losers, exclamation mark. And I'm not sure if that's the drug trying to demean, again, the addiction trying to demean the user in order to, destroy their self-worth so that they come back to the addiction, or if that might be, yeah, I don't remember when that line is said. And then we bring back a chorus from earlier. And I'm pretty sure I'm spot on about this. As usual, though, I'm kind of cherry picking. There are a lot of lyrics in this song for 7 minutes. There's double digits as far as stanzas go, 12, 13 stanzas maybe. There's a lot of words going on here, and um, there's some Latin in here as well. But it is interesting to hear at least a lot of beauty and positivity in the opening elements, even if in my interpretation, it seems to be a misguided kind of beauty. I definitely see that though, and about the halfway point, things begin to get dark, and the word choices completely flip. We go from freeing the mind and healing the scars, that kind of stuff, even though it's not actually doing that, it's actually kind of making things worse. But this perception of fixing things with the addiction, to wrecking the brain, it's a never ending game. They want to steal my joy away and put me in a nightmare. It's a vastly different jump. Also, I love the addictions, assuming I'm remembering this correctly, the addiction's use of repetition. There's a lot of flowy, poetic vocabulary being utilized throughout the rest of the work. Everything seems to be created or written in a way that emphasizes unique elements. It makes every line feel interesting and unique. And then we get to the growls, and they say, give me what I want, give me what I need. That's what I want, that's what I need. Right now, right now, give me what I want right now. It's a lot of this repetition, this demand. It's not about an eloquent portrayal of it, because addiction is not eloquent. It is a feeling, a necessity. It doesn't go away, and it only requests one thing. So yeah, to really bring that personification around in the use of vocabulary is awesome. Assuming I'm pairing the right stanzas to the right voice here. But yeah, overall, I love this song even without knowing what the vocal context is, but I think they do a pretty good job pairing things as well. I will say that I don't think the musical component really has as much to do. They could achieve a similar pairing of the lyrics with the music if they simplified it and just kind of stuck with the overall atmospheres, because that's really the only thing that I'm seeing connected there. But I'm really glad that they just kind of take what they're already great at, which is making these really strong multi-layered compositions, and pairing them with lyrics that work with the atmospheres. Not every song needs to have this intricate connection between what's being played and what's being sung about. Sometimes you just need some good music with some good lyrics. And I think that's what's happening here. To dive any deeper into that, I think would be moving into a realm of non-intent. There might be some really cool coincidences, but I don't think that they were intentional. I think they were really just aiming for atmospheres and emotions that worked well with the lyrics that were going to be sung there, and then they put in some multi-layered stuff that fit those feelings and emotions. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Epica's Chasing the Dragon. This is where you guys come in, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this track, if there's anything that stood out to you, anything you want to add to it, anything that I touched on that you felt should have been expanded. Let me know. When you're done with the comments, you can head up to the description box. In there's a link for Linktree. Take you to this menu right here. It has everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, support the channel through Patreon, which will give you access to voting on future songs and themes. You can submit special selections. You can follow me on Twitter. You can join the Discord community. There's just a bunch of stuff in there. Go ahead and check that link out. Above the description box, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. That wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC. We'll be looking at more hard rock and another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.